Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Perth Town Hall election debate. Great to have your company this evening. We've been having a lot of fun so far, if you can call it that. Now, if you'd like to participate this evening, you can still do so via the internet. If you've got access to Twitter, just use the hashtag WAPoll, and we'll read those questions out as well. All right, we've got our last two candidates who are going to be coming up now. One of them is Lynn MacLaren from the Greens, and we've had our audience decide who the second contender is. I'll just get that off our floor manager if I can. Thank you very much. And the other candidate is Greg Ross. Greg and Lynn, if you could both make your way up, please. Thank you very much. Welcome to you both. Lynn, you've got 1 minute to state who you are and what you're all about.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening. I'm Lynn MacLaren. I'm the Greens member for the South Metropolitan Region. I'm running for re-election along with all of my colleagues in the upper house. There's 4 of us. This election, you have a choice to vote one for a party who cares about the people, the planet, and the future. And we're running in all 59 seats in the lower house, and if we're lucky, we'll break in there too as well.
Oh, that's it. Well done. Nice and concise. Greg, you've already had an opportunity to do your 1 minute, so we're going to leave it at that point.
Sure.
I think what we might do is go straight to the floor. I believe Paul already has a question.
Yes, seems I do. Anyway, this one apparently is for all candidates from Hayley, so this seems nicely timed. Hayley's from Huntingdale. It says, Western Australia has the second highest rate of suicide in Australia. Mental illness is at an all-time high. How would you plan to support people with mental health problems in the community?
Greg, you can go first.
Boy, that's a tricky one. I think that suicide rate also has something to do with the death rate on our roads as well, when you start getting to single person, single vehicle accidents. So it's a severe problem. Perhaps we need to look at society as a whole and see why people are in this situation. Maybe it's because we've lost or seem to have lost our family values, our social values. I don't really know the answers. I know that people are alone, and I also know that people are angry. If you look at road rage around the place, and there are people who just are angry and in despair, and then you get to the mental health issues. And for the last 20 years, we've done some dreadful things with mental health. You know, we've put people out on the streets, we haven't looked after them, we've abandoned them, and that puts them in precarious situations. And could I mention the Andrew Mallard case, where he found himself not looked after properly on the streets in Fremantle and suddenly taken advantage of by some overzealous people. So I think we really need to look a lot closer and look after mentally ill people a lot better. And my congratulations also to Jeff Kennett with Beyond Blue for helping men out with depression.
Thank you for that. Lynn.
Well, the Greens have been working for the past 4 years with people in the mental health industry, and we have held roundtables to discuss exactly what their needs are. Obviously, there's a shortage of beds for acute treatment. We've seen problems that have been carefully looked at in relation to people being released prematurely, and the suicide rate has gone up. The Greens are supporting the government's initiative to have a new Mental Health Act. However, the act that's been proposed does have some concerns for us, and we would amend it to ensure that some of the more draconian measures that are introduced in that act would not come to fruition. So it's very important that we take our time over the new Mental Health Act and make sure that it meets the needs of Western Australia, because these people are the most vulnerable that we have in society. They deserve the best treatment that we can give them.
Thanks for that. Back to the audience now. Paul.
Okay, I have a question from Heidi, who slipped this one to me surreptitiously during the answer to that last question. Probably applies to our Greens candidate, saying it's an important issue for them. Why always the stadium? The stadium has been a big topic during this election campaign, as much as, I guess, Metronet and freeways and trains have. The question is, we have a climate change crisis, says Heidi. What are some of the priorities perhaps we're missing in that area?
It's a very good point, Lynn. Why is the stadium so much more important than climate change?
Well, it isn't to us. Certainly to us, we'd like to see more attention placed on initiatives like bringing about renewable energy. And in fact, in this election, we have a costed plan to bring about 100% renewables in this state by 2029. That's what should be hitting in the papers. That's what we should be debating on now. Those are the issues that are really pivotal to the state. The stadium does have its issues. I myself have argued against the location of the stadium. I think it's in the wrong place because of the contamination issues that are presented there.
Where do you think is the right place?
Well, I was interested to hear the Labour Party's option of Kitchener Park, and I'd like to see how that is costed. A lot of these policies that are released during the election, they don't give you the complete costings, so that's something we do need to look at in the cold light of day before we were to put our full support behind it. But I can say that as far as climate change goes, we cannot ignore it. It's going to happen whether or not we deal with it in policy. And I have a bill before the Parliament which would change our planning laws so that we could start that difficult task of planning for the impacts of climate change along our coast. And so if re-elected, I'm hoping that we can pursue that with the new Parliament.
Greg, I still want your comments. On the stadium, but I'm also interested in what Lynn was saying when it comes to climate change. Is that something that
Sure. I'd like to touch on that. First of all, on the stadium, I have to declare myself, I have to out myself. I'm a rugby union man. Where Colin and where Ken is the rugby union stadium. Now, having been a little bit facetious, I do think the AFL is pretty cashed up, and I think it's time they paid a fair whack more for a stadium rather than us as people. However, having said that, let's go back to the issues of mental health, where I think sport has an enormous place to play in keeping our kids happy, keeping them safe, in binding things together, especially young teenage males, testosterone flowing everywhere. So it is something very viable to get to. I also rather like the Labor idea of going to Kitchener Stadium. That one appealed to me as well, because I know what's being done to investors and owners at Burswood with that new stadium going on there, and that's not fair, that's not cricket.
Now, just quickly, because we do have another question from the floor, but I just want to ask you both, how do you feel about the fact that the Liberal Party / Colin Barnett have completely spurned an opportunity tonight to talk with the WA voters, the people that they expressly seek to represent?
Well, I think it's a complete, may I use the word, bastardisation of democracy. If your candidates are too scared or not allowed to come out and front an audience like this because you don't know what questions you're going to get, then you have no right to represent these people. Full stop.
Nicely put.
Look, I don't think you could really improve on what Greg said. It is very disappointing for all of us who believe in democracy and who believe in open debate of ideas. This is where this should happen. People should not go to the polls questioning what the Liberals stand for. And that is why, that's why we've come to this debate, in order to discuss our views and how we can deliver a better future for WA. And to not have the Liberals here is a travesty.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you, guys. All right, more questions from the audience now. Paul.
Thank you, Jason. This one is from Jan, and I guess we can pose it to you, Lynn, seeing as the Greens seem to be the third-run party in this day and age. The question is, of course, Colin Barnett recently announced on the campaign trail about a amping up, shall we say, of the mandatory laws that confiscate your car that could result in something that your neighbour finds offensive. Whether your car's a little bit loud or you forgot to indicate one time, they can apparently confiscate the car and take it away from you. The question, I guess, to our two panellists, if elected, will you support these ridiculous mandatory laws, so says Jan, or do you have an alternative plan to deal with what is apparently an issue of the hoon driver?
Let's go with Lynn first.
Well, addressing the issue of crime in our society doesn't start with taking away people's toys and locking them up. It starts with building a good community for people. It starts with anti-recidivist programs where young people have options of what they can do with their time. It starts with making sure that everyone has enough money to feed themselves and house themselves properly. It starts with education And what we heard only 2 weeks ago from WACOS is that it is much more cost effective to put money into youth programs than it is to jail them. And so every time that any government puts up a bill which calls for mandatory imprisonment or mandatory sentencing, the Greens have stood against that. There is always a case to do something different. There is always a case to look more carefully at the individual and what's going on in our society.
Doesn't that mean that you're not being tough on crime?
No, it means we're being realistic, because we've had lots of bills passed with penalties that imprison people and cause more, they fine you and they put you in jail. And all we've seen is more people in jail and rising crime. If you ever wanted evidence that those programs don't work, you can just look in the jails. So what we need to do is reverse that and invest in young people so that they have other options of what to do with their lives.
All right.
Well, I guess I've got to admit it. I've got a V8 Ford XR8. I've got a 1969 XT Fairmont with the number plate Larrikin on it, and I've got the cruiser motorbike. So to some people, I might fall into the hoon category. And let me be utterly honest, when I was a youngster in New Zealand to get your license at 15, I think I might have been arrested or taken my car off me, except that you couldn't do much in a Triumph Herald or a Morris 1000 that really got you into too much trouble. The difficulty here is it's frustrating when you hear people skidding and burning out, and especially in quiet streets, and they've got an enormous problem in Kalamunda because the Liberals were stupid enough to take away their police station, and that's coming back, let me promise you. But a young kid, somebody up in their 20s makes a mistake and burns the tyre out. Do you take their car off them? Is that something that's utterly soul-destroying so that we have to take their car off them, put them in jail? I don't think so. Do we take them and bring them out into broad daylight with a scrubbing brush and make them scrub off the marks of the road? Now, I rather like that idea.
I like that idea.
But a kid makes a mistake. Come on.
All right, well, we're in agreement here, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Like
I have
idea.
one last question for you both. Now, this one is from Twitter, but I require a reasonably short answer because we're running out of time. Cannabis, marijuana. Now, it used to be that it was, not legal, but you certainly wouldn't, you'd get a caution for possession. That's been changed by the Liberal Party. It's once again illegal, and you can now go to jail for possession of the smallest amount. So the question says, how do you feel about current cannabis legislation, and would you change it? Greg.
Well, I'll go for that. Yes, I would. I'll be 62 the day before the election, so I do hope the people of Kalamunda are giving me a birthday present. Thank you. I think any of us my age, baby boomers, we probably, to quote my friend Bill, well, we didn't inhale that guard. I used to play wonderful air guitar to Hotel California, but that's another story. I think we have to be careful with drugs because they can lead on to various things. But to put people in jail again for smoking a joint, this is not the end of the world. There's a way of talking to people through these things, and maybe it's a misdemeanor or something or other. I think the Labor Party, we're actually on the right path. So, no, I would change that legislation because there, but for the grace of somebody's God, goes my kids or my grandkids or your grandkids caught in that situation. And what are you going to do then? You know? So no.
Yeah, I think when you look at in the big picture, how significant is cannabis abuse? And if you looked at alcohol, which was very well documented recently by Four Corners, if that is a much more serious drug in our society today, no one's suggesting that we jail people for being drunk.
Well, we should.
Now, I think people tend to overfocus on cannabis. I think that, like Greg, you have to look at it in the big picture, in the big scheme of things. And yes, we would like to see it returned to the other law, where it wasn't a jailable offense. I think that's enough said. It should be treated as a health issue, not a crime.
Sorry, I'm just looking at my screen because I've had another tweet come through. All right, how do you both feel about euthanasia?
Well, there is that Lionel York line, isn't there? You know, oh, I think they should be allowed to go there. How are you, Lionel? That is an extremely tricky question. I had a letter published in the West Australian in 2000, 2001. I have a deep personal experience of that. I watched my mum die of a brain tumour. She had 3 operations over 6 years. I nursed her for the last 8 weeks of her life. We eventually had to put her into the hospital, North Shore Hospital in Auckland, Northcote, and my brother and I went to visit one afternoon, and there was this creature attached to wires. And I said to the hospital staff, "Dear God, please turn that off."
So from your perspective, pro-euthanasia?
Yes, but you have to be very careful, because where does that lead to? It may lead to depression, and people are able to get hold of things and do things and take their lives when there is no need for that life to be lost. So I haven't sorted this out of my mind. I will tell you that I had cancer and was given 3 months to live 12, 13 years ago, and I made up my mind if it got too painful they couldn't do anything, I would doctor shop and finish it after a party.
All right.
I don't know whether that makes me pro-euthanasia.
So yes or no? Yes. I'm looking for a yes or no.
It's a really difficult one. I'm worried about the people who would take it as an easy way out. But if somebody is, I have to qualify it, I've got no choice. If somebody is at the end of their life in absolute agony and dying, then it's actually sort of what happens now is the doctor increases the morphine. But whether I can't cope in my mind yet with giving somebody permission to kill somebody. I have trouble with that. Letting somebody ease their own way out.
Yep.
I don't have
I'm
a lot
going to have to leave you there, Greg. I mean, we do have people that write "do not resuscitate" across their own chests. And Greens, if you were in power, if you held the balance of power, would you be pro-euthanasia or anti-euthanasia?
The Greens have, well, the Greens don't actually have a policy on this, but personally, I do support voluntary euthanasia. We debated it last year, and you will see my remarks on record. I believe it's a person's choice. I believe it's a mature choice to be able to give someone the power over their own life. If they're suffering, if they're in pain, if they have the mental faculties to be able to make that decision, it's their decision to make, and I don't think society should stand in the way.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you both for that. I think we've got one more question from the floor. Paul?
We do have one more question. Correct, Jason.
Excellent.
This one is from Janet of Careen. Janet from Careen. It's an environmental question, Janet, if you'd like to ask.
Yeah. This was actually meant to be for, I thought Terry Open was going to be here. 3 years ago, GM canola was exempted with promises of monitoring in MAPS. We've since witnessed several contamination events. The MAPS have stopped. The government doesn't even know where it's growing. So how can it be monitored if we have no idea where it's growing, where it's being grown? How much contamination is too much, and how will the GM genie be put back in the bottle? Thank you.
Did you guys hear that okay?
I didn't get that, I'm sorry.
Lynn, did you hear it?
Yep.
Okay, well, if you can answer it, Greg, you might be able to get the gist of it.
I think the question mainly goes to the fact that this government has lifted the gate and GM is being grown in our fields. And they're even thinking about expanding it to GM wheat. It's crazy talk. No one else in the world is thinking about growing GM wheat. Already we have problems with farmers who are trying to grow non-GM, their markets being threatened by the GM farmers. And what the woman's asking is, how do we put the genie back in the bottle? How do we protect our non-GM markets? How do we ensure that farmers have a genuine choice whether to grow GM or non-GM? And quite frankly, it's going to be difficult, and we're going to need a government that shows leadership and says they are completely opposed to this current system whereby GM is allowed to coexist along non-GM. One way to do that is to make the GM, put the responsibility on the GM farmer for contamination. So right now, if your field is contaminated, it's your responsibility. So you're a non-GM farmer, and you have, weed growing on your property from next door, which is GM, which destroys your non-GM market. It's your problem. And we have to change that. We have to make the responsibility, if someone chooses to grow GM, they should be liable for its contaminating the neighbors.
All right, Greg, are you okay with going with that?
Yeah. I was for a period the CEO of the Darren Field Days, and I have seen farmers come to almost blows with each other about this one. I'm quite conflicted, so conflicted through my fiance. We rang her a relative of hers who's an EU expert. I must admit he's on the farming side for GM, and I said, I want to hear your side as well. We spent probably an hour and a half on the phone, Skype the other night, trying to get it all down. I'm not qualified to say yes or no. I do believe the genie is out of the bottle. He did make an interesting point to me that I don't know whether it's right, but it got me. He said, really what GM is doing is it's advancing things 10 years over the natural selection farmers use. I don't know whether that's right. I'm not totally against it. I'm not totally for it. I don't know what to think about it. I just need to add something in as well, if I may.
Just quickly.
I am mining. I am a fly-in, fly-out mining worker. Responsible mining is bloody good for our state. And I know there were lots of comments before, but I'm for mining, and that's all there is to it.
Well done. Okay, we've got to go back to the floor one more time. Paul?
Thank you. Look, I just thought we'd wrap up with some of the tweets we've had this evening. The hashtag #WayPoll has been the one that we've been using, and people have been putting in their thoughts about tonight's discussion. One of them from David Butler, who says, GM crops, can we talk about the real issues now? I guess that's one of the issues that's come off the boil a little in recent years. Another one from Luke, who's been here tweeting, says he's been following the discussion and says euthanasia with a moving personal story there is a need for euthanasia, but worry about the consequences. We also have one from Cam Jones who says, Greg Ross from Kalamunda, that is a balanced, intelligent guy. There you go, you should frame that one if you like, Greg. And also one from Alex Bainbridge, who says, Lynn opposes Hoon laws, good on you. So it seems we've had a mixed response, some positive, some negative. You can have a look on Twitter if you hashtag #WayPoll to see about the Town Hall debate here this evening. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Paul. Now, Lynn, you have 1 minute to close. Greg, you've already had an opportunity to do so, so you can bow out.
Look, the Greens have costed plans for a light rail network. We have a bike vision which delivers a world-class cycling city. We have the solutions for congestion. We have strategies to address congestion that are cost-effective and innovative. We've proposed how to transform our state to 100% renewable by 2029. I myself have released packages improving housing affordability so that we can increase the amount of housing that's available and along our transit corridors. We have plans to transform Perth. Please look at our website because clearly the media isn't covering our initiatives. We would like to present a future in the state parliament for the people because we do care about the future. Look, we can't make you billion-dollar promises, but we can offer you innovative and cost-effective solutions for some of the big issues that are facing people in WA.
Thank you very much, Lynn. If I could please invite all of our candidates back up on stage again. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause, please, for all of our candidates this evening. Thank you all. It's been a wonderful event this evening, even in the absence of Colin Barnett or anybody else representing the Liberals or the Nationals. It's a shame that we haven't had them here. Hopefully, next time around, next time we have some election debates, they'll be up for it as well. It's been fantastic. Thank you for your company. Thank you to the audience that did turn up this evening. We've had some wonderful questions come through as well. Thank you to those of you who were watching on the internet and sent through your Twitter questions. And a mighty big thank you to the WTV crew who put everything together tonight. You've done a great job as always. I'd also like to thank our sponsors this evening who have done the lovely printing and even the Perth Town Hall who have allowed us to use their facilities. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much for your company. We'll hopefully see you again soon. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you very much.